Hello and welcome to the first Urban by Nature Lunch and Learn from the Scottish Hub. Urban by Nature is a programme that was developed by ICLEI. It's a facilitated capacity building programme promoting exchange between researchers, SMEs, cities, NGOs. We hope that we can start to build more peer-to-peer knowledge, and we hope that we can all inspire each other. As you'll have noticed, this session is being recorded. That will allow us to put the session onto the Urban by Nature YouTube channel, so you can review this. So you can, if there's anything that's of interest, you can watch it again, or you can revisit it if you have a light bulb moment and think, I remember somebody saying this. We're one of a number of Urban by Nature communities. There are hubs in South Korea, Brazil, the Caucasus. There are two other European hubs, one in the Spanish language running out of A Coruña in Spain, and one in Dutch or Flemish running out of Genk in Belgium. We welcome everybody from both Scotland and from across the UK, Ireland and Europe. If you want to have sessions in English, this is hopefully where you come and join us. We have 3 talks for you, and I also should say is that we're really, really grateful to the Centre for Sustainable Solutions at Glasgow Uni for co-producing this with us and co-running this with us, and they're twiddling all the stuff at the back. We've got 3 sessions for you. So I'm Gillian Dick from Glasgow City Council, and I'm going to be chairing this lunchtime. And we have an opening 10-minute talk from Shreya Utkarsh, who's an ICLEI officer on sustainable resources and climate resilience, and she's going to give you an introduction to Urban by Nature. That will then be followed by Duncan Booker, who's the stakeholder manager at Glasgow City Council, and Duncan's going to talk about cities and climate leadership. And bringing us home will be Professor Jamie Toney, who's the director of the Centre for Sustainable Solutions, and she's going to talk about from green recovery dialogues to funding for nature-based solutions. So we have a Q&A at the bottom, so if you have any questions that you want to ask during these presentations, please put them into the Q&A, and we'll try and cover them in the final 30 minutes at the end. We may not reach all of those questions, but we will try and make sure that we get the answers to any of those questions back. I'll keep an eye on the Q&As. If there's a quick answer, I'll put the answer in straight away. If not, I'll ask the panelists as we go. So without further ado, I am going to hand the floor over to Shreya to give you an introduction to Urban by Nature. The floor is yours, Shreya.
Thank you so much, Gillian, and I'm happy to see so many participants today to this webinar. I'm going to share my screen quickly. 1 second. There it is, and in presenter mode. All right, do you see it? So it is Urban by Nature program, which Gillian already mentioned a bit in terms of for knowledge sharing and capacity building on nature-based solutions. And today we are specifically talking from a Scottish hub perspective. And just to say what the unique offer of Urban by Nature is, that it is more of a, let's say, facilitated capacity building expertise sharing program, where we also invite local governments, not only, but also researchers, businesses, practitioners, and even interested citizens all over the world to come together to harness the potential of nature. And it is a step-by-step run program, which is based on the integrated planning processes mentioned in the ISO 37101. So of course, just saying that it is based on a very solid background of standards, and also based on the Cities with Nature, so to say, a circular approach that they have to analyze, act, and accelerate. And you can see that this is our, let's say, curriculum in a sum, and what all we provide goes from, of course, today as we are doing a webinar, but then there will be some roundtables and some other communications, some awareness raising, and so on. So quite a range of activities that we incorporate when we establish and also implement this program. Where did it come from? What does it entail? So it was developed within the EU-funded project Connecting Nature in 2019, of which Glasgow as well was part of, and has also then been taken over or taken forward by Clever Cities project. It is hosted by Cities with Nature, and it currently operates via webinars, workshops, series such as for cities, local governments, and also other associated communities throughout geographical hubs. And as Gillian already mentioned, we have currently 9 active hubs, and you can see on the map just show where all we are placed at the moment, and Scotland being one of them. So we also have developed a promotional video, which you can access by scanning this QR code. It was launched some time ago and has already garnered 1,200 clicks so far. And there has been a lot of positive feedback from various stakeholders, which shows how important it is to talk about nature-based solutions from a step-by-step approach, and also so that it can generate benefits for the environment and society. So that's about the impact so far, and just to show that we have about 1,000+ registrants, approximately ranging from 100+ countries, with and we have provided so far about 70 videos, which you can access on the Cities with Nature YouTube channel, but some of them, which are specifically to the UrbanByNature hubs, are placed on the UrbanByNature website as well. And you can see that we also, with the Cities with Nature platform, are connected to this biodiversity commitment idea with 230+ signatories, and that is backing UrbanByNature program as well. Apart from that, we've also had contribution to the Edinburgh process and the declaration to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So this is in a nutshell, like how it looks like. There are different steps. You can see there are 7 steps, and I'll just quickly try to go one by one, running through the steps. I'll be quick on this. So first of all, you join a community, and here it could be, as I said, like different actors that are interested, ranging from policymakers to interested citizens. The idea would be to learn and improve together with analyzing, acting, and accelerating our actions. How you can do that is through registering or filling in the registration form, where you can explore the program and also see the different steps in more detail. And just to say that together, of course, we can create areas and places for better living and healthier living and lifestyle in the urban nature context. Second step is on Explore, where we go into baseline analysis and understanding of what the enablers and barriers are at the moment, and how can that be lifted to integrate more nature in cities. How you can take action in this is, of course, these webinars are providing you this, and there'll be like more in-depth information on specific themes where you can learn more. So just to say that we go beyond and explore further with our program. The third step is on prioritization, so setting goals and targets to make sure that your targets are also aligned with local conditions and existing policy frameworks, and also targets that have to be met. This you can do through the step 3, which also provides guidance to you to translate the nature-based solutions or intervention options for the local context in relation to the identified challenges and opportunities. And together, this can be then transferred based on your local needs. So the priorities that can be specific to your local needs are being how do you say, like catered to. And then fourth step is on commit and plan. So to make sure that there is commitment coming from the policymaker side, and also there's planning processes from the administration to make sure that the planning for nature-based solutions is coherent and also takes care of the set priorities and the enablers, barriers that have been already explored and understood. Then looking at this as more of a piece of the puzzle. So there are puzzles, the pieces being from governance models to finance models, as well as investment strategies and such. And then this brings together kind of a whole picture towards the fifth step, which is on implementation. And here you will look into how to prepare for the implementation of nature-based solutions in your area. Businesses are also addressed in this to ensure public-private partnerships as well. And this could look like different, it could look different. So it could be from street trees to urban gardens to green walls and green facades and so on. So of course, looking at the different types of nature-based solutions, ranging from new to retrofitting ecosystems with nature-based solutions, or even going beyond creating new ecosystems. And sixth step being on monitoring. So once you've done all these steps, you also want to make sure that you can monitor and evaluate the work that you've done to ensure that there has been that it is based on identified indicators, and so that you can evaluate the results to make sure that you can then in the end adjust to the needs that might be there to ensure good outcomes and impact on a large scale. And lastly is the step 7, which is an upscale, which means that you don't only necessarily do it within your city, but also go beyond and look into city to city, peer-to-peer learning, but also on a, let's say, larger scale. It could be the Scottish Hub also talks with it more on the UK side. So we were already listening that there might be participants from all over UK, but also in Europe. So how to go beyond that is also something we look at. And you can see here that there are participants that have been involved, and also the signatories, so the members of the UrbanByNature program range from everywhere. So it's global spread, and it's only growing. So I welcome every one of you to join UrbanByNature program by filling in the registration form. The link I'll send in a bit in the chat. And just to say that it has been established as a free access legacy with about 10,000 clicks so far in 100+ cities and countries. And the UrbanByNature program, as I said, is hosted by Cities with Nature, and you can find all the information by clicking on this or scanning this QR code, which leads you to the Cities with Nature YouTube channel. So just to say, finally, register for the program, and thank you so much. Get in touch with us by contacting us on this email address. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shreya. That was really good. If anybody has any questions, Shreya, if you can put them into the Q&A, we'll pick them up afterwards. I'm now going to pass the baton on to Duncan Booker, who's going to home you in a bit on Glasgow, because we're the Scottish Hub, and talk about cities and climate leadership. So the floor is yours, Duncan.
Thank you so much, Gillian, and it's a real privilege to be here. Hello to everyone. I'm really looking forward to learning from you all. Can I just check, Gillian, if you can see the full screen there?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you very much. Well, obviously, it's a privilege to be here at the first UrbanByNature Hub, and I'm going to focus especially on that urban dimension, because my contention is that our cities manage both to be the locus to, but also solution to, many of the world's difficult issues, and how we live together with social justice and sustainability in ways that respect planetary boundaries and engage as positively and collaboratively with nature are at the very heart of that urban dimension to global and national problems. And one of the key messages that Glasgow as host city for COP26 gave to the world and to ourselves was simply this, that whilst nations make pledges at COP or fail to agree all that much, it's cities which are delivering on the promise of a net zero, climate resilient, socially just future that collaborates positively with nature. And so I'm going to speak about the city I know best, which is Glasgow, but in many ways Glasgow can act as a proxy for the world's other cities and places. And the image you see here on the opening slide gives you a good illustration of the kind of dense built form of Glasgow, but also open and green space and nature and biodiversity finding its way into that picture. And that, of course, is the challenge. When I said, how do we live together? You could naturally think that's about people, but it is about us and non-human species too. And therein lies the absolute challenge we all face. Glasgow, of course, has a long and vibrant history, and much of that was as one of the titans of the industrial age. And we undertook a transition, quite difficult as we left and lost industry, to become what we now hope is a cleaner and greener society and economy. And we share that experience with many other cities around the world, including our sister city and twin titan of the global age, Pittsburgh from the United States, which you see here. The Scottish Just Transition Commission has spoken of the importance of, quote, an orderly and managed transition to a greener economy and society, whilst all our history, of course, is of unjust transitions, of disorderly and unmanaged transformations. And that's where one of the key challenges lies, of protecting our people and protecting our environment and protecting nature as we move into what we hope is that transition to a very different future. And that is very much about collaborating with other cities from around the world. You have here in front of you an image from COP26 last November of Glasgow, literally, but also figuratively, on the world stage with other cities. Our leader, Susan Aitken, is number 6 from the left there. And in the middle, you have Michael Bloomberg and Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, the new chair of C40. And that conversation amongst urban peers naturally brings to the fore the issues of decarbonisation, social justice, adaptation, and nature-based solutions, and working with and for nature. And that's a conversation we've continued to have since COP26. And it's one we continue to have a number of other collaborations around the world. I just want to tell you a little bit more about them, because they are the places where in many ways we develop policy, consider our different actions in our urban settings, and learn from each other and make common cause, particularly, of course, towards our respective national governments. The CNCA stands for Climate Neutral Cities Alliance, and it's one of the key collaborations that Glasgow joined, particularly as a result of COP26, of ambitious cities with very, very radical decarbonisation targets, in Glasgow's case to achieve net zero carbon emissions by the year 2030. CNCA has also introduced us to our friends at Cities for Forests, a global collaboration looking to connect the local, the near forest with the far forest, with our trees and woodlands strategy, which Gillian's leading on, to tropical hardwood forests around the global south, and in particular how, through protecting the rights of Indigenous and First Nations peoples within those forest environments with sustainable timber, we can look at how we protect the forests themselves and the non-human species that depend upon them. A good example of how cities are trying to really be at the forefront of that urban and global sustainability agenda. We're also part of C40's work around girls and women for climate leadership, looking particularly at Sustainable Development Goal 5. And if there's anything on a global scale that really links in to local communities and leadership, it is that SDG 5 element. And we're looking to do something here in Glasgow that can reach out to girls and women around the world, just as we also do with the Global Resilient Cities Network, which is one looking particularly at how we focus these days on the very challenging and overlapping crises of COVID, climate, and the cost of living, something, of course, that has become even more difficult in recent months, particularly with the European war as well. And those are unforeseen, but challenges that we need to face, and one which, again, that planetary discussion amongst our cities is going to be a key part of. And all of these groupings will be at COP27 in a couple of weeks' time in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, as will the leader of Glasgow City Council, who will be engaging once more with these partnerships to learn from them, to share our experience, and, as I said earlier, to make common cause with them. And it's just worth thinking a little bit. I've talked about history before. We should have some degree of confidence from our urban experience. Cities are the places that took the powers to themselves to make better places for our people. This is a page from a 1938 catalogue from this wonderfully titled Glasgow Corporation Electricity Department, and it shows how the city itself generated energy and kept trying to reduce the cost for its local customers, who were also its citizens, of course. Now, there's a model there of what we might call municipal activism that is transferable to a whole load of other areas, from the justice agenda to the nature-based solutions, and working to ensure biodiversity. And it just shows and illustrates that we actually have a history we can draw upon, from clean water from Loch Katrine here in Glasgow to deal with communicable diseases back in the 1860s, through to our aims right now to explore low carbon heating from, for instance, geothermal sources, as well as the work that Gillian's been leading on with nature-based solutions. So we should take some confidence from our own history that we can do some of these things, and the challenges we face may not be quite as bad as they were in 1938 on the cusp of a war for Glasgow, for instance. And of course, ICLEI is key to all of that as well. So ICLEI is not just cities, it's local government and local government associations around the world, and is absolutely one of the key partners for Glasgow and many, many other places around the world, and one of the at the forefront of the kind of local government municipal associations constituency in the UNFCCC discussions. But as well as cities with nature, that's obviously a key aspect of our membership of ICLEI, we've also been part of a post-industrial cities collaboration called the Urban Transitions Alliance. And the picture you see on your right there includes an image of urban gardening from Minneapolis, which shows again that sense in which cities share with each other experience of how we tackle some of these issues, and racial disparities alongside that, in particular for Minneapolis, to ensure that we are at the forefront of learning, but also of action and mobilizing meaningful change. That, of course, has climate justice at its fore. And on the left, you see here a Just Transition Skills Action Plan for the City of Glasgow, a way in which we can try to manage that transition more equitably for our people so that they don't get left behind as they did when we deindustrialized from the 1970s onwards. But Glasgow is also very mindful of the global imprint it has, particularly as in a post-colonial world where we were once part of an empire. And the image on the right there is of Indigenous and First Nations peoples at COP26. And that's a crucial issue. If we protect the rights of our communities around the world, particularly Indigenous peoples, then we have a good chance of protecting the natural environment, and we have a better chance still of protecting non-human species with which those Indigenous peoples have lived over many, many millennia. And so there's a strong sense there in which, if we get these things right around justice locally, justice globally, and working with and for nature in a collaborative way, then actually the future we're looking for could be delivered in a really positive way. And my last point is simply this. It can all too often sound like COPs and sustainability work is all about big institutions talking to one another. And it is, of course, precisely that. But it is also, and must always be, about working with and for our communities, focusing on their lived experience and their diversity, which is the strength that makes places like Glasgow more resilient, and which I'm sure will resonate with you wherever you are across Europe, and ensure that we can work not just with our people, but with non-human species and with the natural environment too. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Duncan. That's good. I'm just going to say we have solved the problem with the chat. So if you want to chat to each other, the chat is now open to all of you. So you don't necessarily have to come up with questions. If you have any questions for what Duncan has presented, if you put them in the Q&A or any comments, just put them in the chat and we'll pick them up at the end. Just before I move on to Jamie, who's going to bring us home, what I will say is we have a number of webinars lined up coming forward. But if anybody has any theme suggestions that they want us to cover, please come back to us, either put that in the chat or we will be sending out a mailing, and I will remind us to ask for suggestions. If anybody has got burning ambitions to give us a 10-minute chat on your area of expertise, we would welcome them as well. So I'm now going to hand the floor over to Jamie Tony from the Centre for Sustainable Solution, and Jamie's going to talk about green recovery dialogues to funding for nature-based solution. The floor is yours, Jamie.
Yes, greetings everybody. Let me just share my screen with you. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, yeah, so greetings everyone. I'm really excited to be here today as part of the launch for UrbanByNature, the Scottish Hub. And what I want to do is walk you through what the University of Glasgow has been doing in partnership with Glasgow City Council to build capacity for tackling the climate and ecological emergency within the city. In April 2020, we launched the Center for Sustainable Solutions with recognition that there was not enough action happening within our own institute, but also more broadly around the climate and ecological emergency. And so the center has a vision to enable individuals, communities, and organizations to act towards a sustainable future. And being part of the higher education institutes, we try to do that through education, research, and partnership. And just before I say much more, it's probably worthwhile telling you how we sort of look at or define sustainability. So we define sustainability as meeting the social foundations of the current and future generations while living responsibly within a healthy natural environment. So the Center for Sustainable Solutions has been building networks and partnerships with public and private sector organizations locally, nationally, and internationally. And one of the highlights of our collaborative work has really been our partnership with Glasgow City Council. With Glasgow City Council alongside Policy Scotland, we co-organized a series of solution-focused recovery dialogues. And in these dialogues, we aim to understand how we move from COVID-19 to COP26 and now beyond, asking questions like what urgent actions need to take place in order to make change. What are we doing now because of COVID that actually helps benefit our environment or benefits our people that could be, instead of being just a temporary measure, could be made permanent. So what we did is we brought together researchers, policymakers, and practitioners on topics that we chose that aligned with our research expertise, but also aligned with some of the major priorities and challenges within the city. And so these areas were implementing green futures, including things like nature-based solutions, low carbon energy and housing, and rethinking consumption. I'm not going to go into these outcomes in any detail, but hopefully what you can see here is that these dialogues added a great deal of richness to our understanding of the challenges that the city faced, and understanding the complexity, I think, is a key issue in terms of how we move forward and how we come to appropriate and holistic solutions to address the challenges that we're facing today. So some of the things that I will highlight is there were a number of overarching themes that emerged from all of these dialogues. And this really guides our work in terms of how we move forward. So these included things like environmental sustainability and social justice need to go hand in hand. And this is where the environmental, the social, the well-being, and economic agendas all come together. Understanding the value of collaborating with communities and place-based approaches for community benefit is incredibly important. And also that there's a really strong need for policy planning and decision-making to be aligned and driven by data and evidence that's easy to access. So these were all of the sort of outcomes that came out of the understandings of the green recovery dialogues, but really sort of drive us moving forward in terms of what sort of solutions we're trying to come to. So we took these outcomes to a roundtable of senior leaders from across the public and private sector throughout the city. And this helped us identify where there are high-level challenges or barriers preventing progress around sustainability. And so the areas that really came to the forefront here were things like having consistency around education, training, and skills, making sure that the partnerships in place across the city are strong partnerships and their collaborations between the private and public sector. Thinking about ways in which we can create more collaborative climate finance for things like nature-based solutions. And then there was also a really interesting energy among the senior leaders to come together and collaborate and recognize that they need to do that more often. So I think so that really set the enabling conditions for us to convene 60 researchers across the University of Glasgow and 28 public and private sector partners to collaborate and put together a proposal to our Natural Environmental Research Council, which has been funded for about £10 million as a strategic program. And this is called Gallant. So Glasgow as a living lab accelerating novel transformation. And over the next 5 years, what we'll be doing is using the city as a living lab to understand how whole system solutions can tackle some of the most difficult challenges, including flood adaptation and resilience, enhancing biodiversity across the city, regenerating vacant and derelict land, increasing the uptake of active travel, and also looking at community scale energy projects. And wherever possible, we want to integrate these sorts of projects. So for instance, if our community collaboration work stream shows that there's a community that's showing up high in the Scottish Index of Multi-Deprivation, and we recognize that they do not have access to healthy food, for example. Sorry, there was somebody at the door. So if they don't have access to healthy food, for example, can we find ways to regenerate vacant and derelict land, bring in clean energy solutions to power a greenhouse to serve as a community food hub, for example? So these are the kind of solutions that we're trying to come to now as an integrated approach. So we're using donut economics as the base of understanding our city as a system. I won't go into this in any sort of detail, but what I would like to say is this gives us a really useful way to look at both the social foundations that we want the city to meet in order to be thriving, but also, as Duncan talked about as well, helps us make sure we're living within those planetary boundaries of a 1.5 degree world. And so in the current landscape, where we see governments, especially the Scottish government and the EU, moving toward mission approaches, I think there's a real need for solution-focused work, and we need to be able to learn from each other. So we're just in the first year of a 5-year program with Gallant, but we're really keen to, as we start developing our solutions, some of which will be nature-based solutions, we're really keen to share what we're learning, and we're really keen to continue tuning in here and learn from other people who are presenting projects as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That's good. We've actually managed to bring all 3 presentations in by past. Just while people might be thinking about questions and answers, I'm going to kind of do the little bit of plea. I will do it at the end as well. We are going to reach out to all of you and see if there are themes that you are interested in hearing about and hearing more talks about, or items that you're interested in sharing with us. We're looking at people talking to us about their technical solutions, so what you've done on site, about governance, how you've managed things, how you've looked at enterprise and financing, how you've co-produced with communities, how you've looked at what went well and what didn't go so well. So you've reflected on the good, the bad, and the indifferent, because we don't always succeed at the first go. And how you've kind of looked at the impact, so how you've measured impact, how you've looked at the data. All of that we can cover. We're interested to know what you're interested in either sharing or hearing more about. There's certainly Wendy Campbell was saying interested in looking at cross-city session on blue-green infrastructure, the status quo, and how we usefully dovetail going forward, particularly on a finance tie-in and piggybacking on the net zero momentum. So I don't know whether Jamie or Duncan want to comment on kind of looking at that kind of blue-green. Certainly I know that there's some work that Gallant are doing, but from a city perspective, Duncan, because you've been looking at the new city kind of strategy, how does the net zero and stuff tie into that?
Mm-hmm. By a stroke of good fortune or otherwise, the new council strategic plan for the next 5 years to direct the work of the council towards 2027 is going through a discussion right now amongst elected members at the full council. So that will determine the nature of the administration right up to 2027. During this next 5 years, everything needs to be delivered if we are to be seriously on track for our 2030 net zero carbon emissions target, and if we are to become a more resilient, adapted, and nature-based city. I do want to pick up on one of the issues that was raised in that question, which is about finance. Glasgow and many other cities are not short of ambitions. We set targets, and we often are much earlier in our targets than nations. So the United Kingdom's net zero carbon targets 2045. Scotland's 2040, Glasgow's 2030. And those nations need these cities to deliver on time if they are to achieve those national ambitions. Having said that, we are somewhat short of the capital with which to mobilize those ambitions. And one of the key discussions we're having is not just going to, in our case, two national governments, Scottish and UK, but also how we reach out to the private capital markets, how we recognize, for instance, that the insurance and pensions industry are looking to divest from fossil fuels and will want to reinvest all those billions in safe bets like, I would hope, a local authority. And that's where I think there's global conversations with other cities, and particularly ICLEI, on climate finance come into their fore. And that is sometimes around the technology of low carbon heating solutions and low carbon net zero, that is transport, but it is also about blue-green solutions. It is also about working with and for nature across our cities and recognizing a different urban form than perhaps we've had over the last century or more. And I think that's a real challenge for us, but it's one that we know we need to face. And it's one where I would always say to people, innovation needs to be about tech, but it also needs to be about finance and governance. And I think Gallant in particular here in Glasgow will help us to explore some of those lessons and to have that open conversation about how we arrive at our shared goals.
Yeah, so I'm going to pass over to Jamie to see if she's got any comments on the financing or the governance. And Sherry, if I come to you afterwards, because you and I were both at an interesting thing where Bankers Without Borders were talking, so it might be worthwhile talking about what they're doing and what they were presenting. So if I go Jamie first, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really interesting question, and of course, as Duncan said, there's no lack of ambition around Glasgow. I don't think at all. I think everybody needs to recognize that the public sector isn't going to be able to fund the investment that's needed in order to move to net zero, especially for a target of 2030 on its own. I know that the Green Economy manager of the city has projected that investment will need to be somewhere on the order of £30 billion. So while we're really happy with the funding we've been able to bring to the problem with Gallant, and we're helping to look at where policy and where finance can come together and help fund some of these nature-based solutions, and definitely share methods and approaches to how we do that in a placemaking way, there's certainly still a long ways to go in order to actually fund all of the blue-green infrastructure that is needed within the city. I've seen a lot of innovative things happening, though, I think in part because Glasgow City Council is so progressive and so willing to work and collaborate with other people. There's an initiative that's run by the Dark Matter Lab called Trees AI. That's one that if we could get them to maybe come talk in one of these sessions as well. They're actually building platforms where you can put nature-based solutions in, and they're starting to think about those things around what is the actual savings that you get from implementing nature-based solutions in the long term. How do you put those on a platform that allows private investors to bring portfolios together that are big enough investments that then can fund future projects and continuation of projects and things like that. So there's a lot of really interesting things happening around the city, which we could probably showcase more in these sessions as well.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to pass over to Shrey just to kind of take the kind of, because it's not just us looking at those finance issues, and it would be interesting to get ICLEI's take in the conversations that you have been having with Bankers Without Borders.
Yeah, definitely. Really interesting point for sure, because the thing is that when we were talking with the Bankers Without Borders as well, and also other businesses that are involved in certain aspects of nature-based solutions, they're talking quite a bit on nature finance disclosures. So there's a movement to make sure that more and more companies and businesses also disclose their so yeah, Bankers Without Boundaries. Yes, thanks Daniela for that, of course, and also to look at how can they partner with organizations such as ICLEI and others to make sure that there are projects where they can generate more funds and make it available to the cities to actually implement these really great, the ambitions that they have can be realized by actually joining forces with such investing agencies such as Bankers Without Boundaries and others. And also in our attendees list, I saw that we have Agata from UbN, which is the European Business network based in Brussels, which is also talking quite a bit on crowdsourcing opportunities and green bonds and other mechanisms where it's not only about the public capital that is present for the cities, but also going beyond and doing this public-private partnerships. So there's quite a lot of avenues available, but how to actually reach out and how to make sure that this works only has a greater potential when we collaborate together in projects and also go beyond developing it.
Cool. What I will note is that certainly there is, or it sounds like we need a themed session on financing, which is good. I'm also noting in the chat that Derek Irvin and Wendy Campbell are both interested in blue-green, and Derek suggesting we take that wider around the water and the blue space. And seeing as the biggest open space in Glasgow is actually the River Clyde, that's quite a good kind of call. And I know that Derek's doing some work within Stirling University on looking at that very kind of thing. What we have got lined up, I'm not seeing any more questions and I'm not seeing any more comments coming back. Duncan has a question. I'll hand the floor to you, Duncan, go for it.
As a comment, really following up on what Jamie and Shreya have been saying, actually picking up on Jamie with donut economics, which is essentially a planetary ceiling within which we need to live, but also a foundation below which you can't go for the purposes of social justice and protecting our most vulnerable in the transition. And I'm minded as well of something in the UK was published, I think, at the early part of last year, called the Dasgupta Report, which was about natural capital. And it was fundamentally about challenging economic orthodoxy, which sees nature as an externality, something that you just use up and it's there and it's given and you just do with it what you wish. And fundamentally, that report was saying that is not how we can continue to go on here locally or globally, knowing that much of our production and many of our emissions have been offshored to much poorer countries and poorly paid workforces, as well as places that are destroying the natural environment. And that putting a cost and a value on that, including some of the rather difficult ones of the kind of offshore marine environment as well, where national boundaries become more hazy, is going to have to be key. So I think that whole notion of how we value nature in all senses of value, the fundamental one, how we value it as part and parcel of our own, planet on which we live, but also how it's given a monetary value in ways that could actually help support and protect it. And I know that sounds a little bit instrumental and at times a little bit of an approach within perhaps a failed system, but it's maybe a transitional method of ensuring that system, which is based upon global capital, can move in the right direction. And I think that's quite fascinating if taken up, and there are signs that some of the big banks and so forth are looking into that, and that culturally we're seeing a shift there.
No, that's really good. And Callum had put in the Q&A a link to a UK government report on economics, which I've just kind of pulled across into the chat so that everybody can get that. I'm not seeing any more questions. I don't know whether Jamie or Shreya or Duncan have questions for each other before I go into the kind of roundup. Shreya?
Maybe one question, and just to understand, because right now we are also going towards the COP15 for biodiversity, but we are in the process of also determining how these ambitions can then relate to the European nature restoration law, for instance. And I'm just trying to understand if this also has implications in the UK, and how is UK responding to that? What would be the let's say the kind of mandatory nature of such law also in the UK context, and how are they looking at that?
I'll start and then I'll maybe pass to Duncan or whatever. I think from a Scottish context, and I will say a Scottish context, Scotland is trying to track the EU legislation either by linking into the UN guidance or the UN SDGs, but definitely in a Scottish context, our legislation is trying to stay in line with the EU. We're trying to watch what's going on. We have close collaborations with the likes of Ireland because their landscapes and their environments are very, very similar to us. So what works there will work for us. I think there could well be shifts coming down south that might disalign, but then may realign at later dates. I don't know, Duncan, whether you've got any comments because you're closer to the political kind of thing than I am.
Just to mirror what you said, Gillian, in terms of the Scottish Government, which also co-chairs the Under 2 Coalition, and therefore links very much to that urban and regional agenda for climate leadership. In fact, the Scottish Government's the co-sponsor of the ICLEI Pavilion in the Blue Zone at COP27 in a couple of weeks' time. So that's crucial. I would just add as well, the First Minister just very recently has made some very strong comments about the loss and damage agenda, which is strongly linked to nature, but also strongly linked to the climate justice agenda. And I think that's one that Scotland's taken a particularly strong focus on. And so, as Gillian said, we're part of the EU Mission 100 Climate and Smart Cities, as one of the very few UK cities in that. And I think there's a very strong intention on the part of the Scottish Government to really track European as well as global debates on this. But having said which as well, we wait to see with the UK government as well, which is just about to pass the COP presidency over to Egypt, what physical presence it'll have at COP27 and what messaging will appear. I suppose we just need to keep watching the media channels the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the other thing to bear in mind is the COP15, which is the biodiversity one in Montreal, Canada. I think our leader's been invited to it, and there's some side kind of stuff that we're getting involved in. What I would say for anybody that's listening in, Glasgow is signed up to and is a cities with nature under ICLEI. They now have regions with nature. That has a number of commitments that you can work through, and it again gives you guidance. So I would recommend, if you work for a local authority, to have a look at cities with nature or regions with nature, because it's a really good resource to help you have conversations and discussions with colleagues in other departments, with academics that surround you, and with the politicians as well. And I think ICLEI are going to lift some of the data from the cities with nature to present at COP15. I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. There's some useful reports being put into the chat, and we will rescue any useful links that people have given us and circulate them around. What I will do is say thank you very much for joining us. We have a number of sessions planned, and there will be a slide appearing very shortly that will give you a link to our next one. So our next Urban by Nature Lunch and Learn is on Thursday, the 8th of December at noon UK time. So that's 1 a.m. in Europe, and you'll have to work out what that time is if you're somewhere else in the world, but you're more than welcome to join us. The theme is Trees for Cities, and that will be chaired by Dr. Dominic McCafferty, the Senior Lecturer in Psychology, Ageing and Welfare at the University of Glasgow. After that, once we get into the new year, we're going to look at the water. So Derek and Wendy, we will be coming for you to help us curate that session. We are also talking about doing a session based around place-based, so more of that localized theme. But as I said before, if you have a think about any themes, any subjects that you want us to cover, we would welcome those suggestions. We would welcome the collaboration. If you've got an idea for a 10-minute talk and it's only 10 minutes you need to do, we'd welcome that as well. We'll hopefully run this session of Lunch and Learns, but we'll look, as the weather either improves or get worse, at opportunities to do site visits or bring people together in collaborative spaces. Certainly for those of you in Scotland, the university has a really lovely building called the Arc, which is a great collaborative space for bringing people together. It has a lovely kind of grey, blue, green open space out with it. It's in the Partick area, and it's a really nice rebuild if you want to have a look at that. Nicola, do you want to put up the slide that has the details, because we'll kind of bring ourselves home. So I will say thank you. There's been a whole load of you who have stuck with us. There is a QR code for the next one. So it is Trees for Cities on Thursday, the 8th of December from 12 noon UK time, 1 p.m. If you're in Europe, there's a QR code there that you can click on to start booking yourselves in. We will be reaching out to people on the water and the blue-green space. We will be reaching out to people on the place. And as I say, if you have any other suggestions, if you have any comments, please come back to us. And this video will be live and available on the Cities with Nature YouTube channel. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope that we've given you a little food for thought, and we hope to see you all on the 8th of December. Thank you very much.